Hi, how you doing? So, I didn't originally plan on this being the topic for this week's video. However, while just absent-mindedly existing online, I encountered the masterpiece that is Filly Funtasia. A show that is quite similar to My Little Pony franchise magic. I mean, it could be a coincidence, who knows? You'll be able to make up your mind by the end of this video though, as we're going to go through the show. Well, at least the first episode. I ain't watching the whole thing. I'm pointing out what it does wrong and what it does right, and compare it to My Little Pony a few times. Anywho, let's keep it short. That's enough for the intro, let's actually get into Filly Funtasia. So starting off, we need to take a little look at the history of the show and how it was made, because it was definitely an interesting story. The show started conceptually back in the mid-2000s when two Danish brothers, Jacob and Henrik Andersen, created the Filly franchise. They kicked off development for the cartoon in 2012 with Tyne S. Norble, who'd already shaped the franchise, writing the story bible and working as art director, though weirdly she went uncredited. At first, BRB International and their animation studio Screen 21 handled production, with help from a Chinese studio Black Dragon. They even had some big names in animation working on concept art and character designs. In 2012, the show was officially announced as simply Filly, with a worldwide release planned for 2014. Over the next couple years, we got teaser after teaser, with the title eventually changing to Filly Funtasia. By then, the show had picked up a roster of writers with real TV experience. Things looked like they were moving smoothly. Except, they weren't. BRB released several trailers between 2013 and 2015, and even announced a couple of movie specials that were supposed to introduce the world and characters. But those never came out, and by 2016, BRB and Screen 21 had quietly walked away from the project. Production ground to a halt. The original studios pulled out, and the series fell into a classic development hell. A couple of years later, in 2018, two new studios, B-Water Animation in Spain and Guangzhou Huami in Hong Kong, jumped in to rescue the project and finish what was left. Finally, after 5 years of delays, Filly Funtasia actually premiered in 2019. Even then, the chaos wasn't over. The original English version didn't show up officially until 2021, even though English trailers had been floating around since 2013. The first proper release was in Singapore, recorded with a New York studio. By that point, many of the original production companies had been scrubbed from the credits entirely. Surprisingly, despite all that drama, the show got a second season, which dropped in China at the end of 2020. A third season has been in the works for years, though it's been pushed back multiple times, still yet to release in 2025. The companies behind it have also changed, with Xiaolong Culture stepping in to fund and control distribution after Draco, the original owners of the franchise, stepped away. So yeah, Filly Funtasia is basically the definition of cursed production. Endless trailers, legal disputes, companies dropping out, years of delays, but somehow, against all odds, it actually exists. So, what is Filly Funtasia? What's the story? The characters? Well, I gotta come clean. As I said in the intro, I haven't and won't watch the whole series. Simply putting it, I wasn't enjoying it and didn't really want to binge the entire thing for one video. If I enjoyed it, it might have been a different story, but hey ho. Due to this, I have to clear up that this isn't a critique of the entire series. In fact, for this video, we're just going to be looking at the first episode to keep things simple. And then, if the first episode does look good to you, feel free to check it out. I feel I need to say this because I'm judging the show based off first impressions only. If it gets really good later on, I'm not going to know that, and I'm not coming at this as someone who has watched the whole thing and has really good knowledge on the show. So yeah, this is just a first impression kind of thing. Now, anywho, onto the show. Finally, am I right? The very first episode of Filly Funtasia wastes no time in setting up its cast and the kind of story it wants to tell. It's so eager that it actually does a sort of flashback thing, like those previously on sections you get at the start of a two-parter in My Little Pony, except this is episode 1. Not too weird though, I get it, hooking the audience into an exciting narrative. Well, it should be, if not for something we see later on, which I'll get into. After this little intro part, things kick off with Will, who's clearly trying to impress his teacher, Miss Twilight. Remind you of anyone? To boot, there's also a character called Princess Sparkle who we meet later. So, there's a Miss Twilight and a Princess Sparkle. Interesting. He's doing this to win some extra favour and hopefully get some better grades. He's baked a batch of cupcakes. It's not exactly the noblest of strategies, but he's proud of his work and determined to make a good impression. I have a sort of nitpicky problem here. Where is Will's magic coming from? There are unicorns in Funtasia, but it appears that unlike My Little Pony, any pony can do magic, whether they have a horn or not. In fact, the races in this show are quite different to My Little Pony. There's fairies, royals, or royales, don't know how it's pronounced really, unicorns. It's actually quite a little more complicated, but again, that doesn't really get developed in episode 1, so. But the details of it are a bit confusing. There are unicorns that we assume use their horns for magic, and there's another character who looks like they can only use magic harnessing a mirror or something. Then of course there's Will, who just appears to be magic imbued since there's no visible source for his magic. Or maybe it's coming from his wings, I'm not really sure, it's quite hard to tell. But I feel like I am kinda nitpicking here, especially on a show that isn't as big or funded as Friendship is Magic. Scrutinizing it to the same level just isn't really fair, but it does make for a fun watching experience. Back to the story. The trouble starts when Will has to step away and leaves the cupcakes in Bella's care. Now Bella, well, let's just say self-control isn't her strongest quality. The second Will's gone, she can't resist sneaking in a taste. One cupcake turns into another, and before long, she's not only eaten some, but manages to drop the rest. In the span of a few moments, the entire batch is ruined. Here we call back to the intro. So basically, you know how the intro was super dramatic, teasing the seemingly devastating events that will unfold throughout the episode? Yeah, well, the most dramatic of those clips is from Bella's imagination. After she eats the cupcakes, she panics and starts worrying about everyone's reaction, and those clips are from there. This feels really cheap to me, like, by using those clips in the intro, you're setting expectations. Expectations that for me were instantly shattered after watching this scene because it shows that the most dramatic scenes were just a character thinking up unrealistic scenarios. After realizing that, I lost a lot of the interest I had in the episode and the show as well, since this is the first episode, it's the first impression of you all get. And basically scamming the audience like this is not a good first impression, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The episode's only just started after all. Panicking, Bella goes straight to Rose for help. Rose, being the more level-headed of the two, wants to smooth things over, but before they can figure out a proper plan, Will returns, expecting his cupcakes. Caught off guard, Rose blurts out that they were stolen. The quick lie sets off a chain reaction that Bella makes even worse. When Will asks who stole them, Bella improvises. Instead of owning up, she invents a mysterious thief, and with every question, this thief gets bigger, scarier, and even more ridiculous. Pretty soon, other Fillies gather round, curious about the commotion, and Bella doubles down, spinning the story of a terrifying cupcake monster. What started as one little lie quickly spirals out of control, and the rumour spreads through the school like wildfire. Students whisper nervously, staff get involved, and even the show's villains, Battywings and Wranglum, end up believing the nonsense. By the way, those villains see basically no development in the first episode. I mean, they're set up, but don't really play into the plot at all. I feel like by this point I need to acknowledge the elephant in the room. The actual quality of the show. Not in terms of writing or story, but actual technical quality. Obviously it's not 2D, so Friendship is Magic isn't really a good comparison for animation. But when comparing it to G5, which is 3D animation, it's clear to see the difference. But for what I can assume is a much lower budget, it's not awful. Yes, obviously it's not perfect, but it's clearly had effort put into it. And the character designs have as well. Though that's actually sort of a bad thing. Let me explain. So I have a bit of a problem with the character design in this show. The individual designs are pretty good in a vacuum, but they also blend together. I found it really hard, despite them having visibly different colours and manes, to actually pick out the main characters. Like, on their own, they look nice. But in the background, with characters walking around behind them and around them, it's so hard to pick them out. It doesn't feel like there's enough individuality somehow, even though, as I've mentioned, and as is, if you're watching, obvious, they're unique from each other. Quite so. Character design is an incredibly hard thing to do in a show or game, and sometimes even designs that on paper were unique can feel bland. I'm no expert in character design, so I can't objectively state what they got wrong, but for me personally, and in my opinion, it's that their character design doesn't give you any real clue as to who they are, and what they're like, which means it's harder to pick them out, and also harder to get invested in them as a whole. Back to Friendship is Magic, the design of their characters is probably the thing most crucial to the show's initial success. Everyone recognises these characters, and also the designs tell a lot about who they are, and their personalities and such. If you took someone who's never watched a show before, and out of the lineup of the main six asked them who's the cowgirl, or who's the fashionista, or that question for all of them, chances are they'd be able to pick the character out just from design. That is good design. In Filly Funtasia, even if the characters themselves are the deepest, most well-written, interesting things in the world, their designs show none of that. They have no more individuality than the background ponies, which is what I think the main problem is with their design. The last aspect to assess is the voice acting and music, which I think is fine. Just fine. The voice acting is pretty good, although it does come off a bit clunky at times.
Be right back. Wait, the cafeteria's closed. Do you think Will won't notice?
That could just be due to the script, but there's no overall major complaints I have with that. The music, however, is just bland. It's your average kids show music. It doesn't stick out as being something particularly memorable. And does this really jarring cut-off thing sometimes, where some background music will start playing, setting a scene perhaps, and then abruptly stop for a character to start talking?
I think that new shampoo is giving me the frizzies.
This is the kind of thing that really shows the more rushed parts of the show. Ordinarily that kind of music would be faded out, or even be specifically written for that scene, ending at the perfect time, but due to time constraints or budget constraints or both, they couldn't do that here in Filly Funtasia. Jesus, that was a long waffle. Let's finish the story now, there isn't too much left. At this point, Will is fuming. His hard work is gone, and instead of sympathy, he's got a whole school caught up in monster panic. Determined to get justice, he decides the best solution is to catch the so-called thief himself. He sets up a trap, ready to prove once and for all that something, or someone, is behind the cupcake catastrophe. Rose, on the other hand, knows exactly what's going on. She repeatedly urges Bella to just tell the truth, but Bella resists, torn between guilt and pride. Admitting she messed up feels impossible, and at the same time, she's enjoying the attention her story has brought her. For a while, she clings to the lie, even as the situation spirals further out of control. Things come to a head when Rose and Bella wander into the forest. Unbeknownst to them, Will's trap has been set nearby. Bella walks straight into it and ends up caught, with no more room to keep pretending. Cornered, she finally confesses to Will. He wasn't a monster, there was no thief, she just ate the cupcakes and ruined the rest. At that point, Will has every right to stay angry, but instead, he does the opposite. He lets Bella go, accepts her apology, and forgives her. The tension that's been building throughout the episode finally breaks, and the three friends make their way back to the school together. And that's the core of episode 1. What starts as a light-hearted setup with some cupcakes turns into a classic snowball lie story, showing how small mistakes can spiral when you refuse to admit to them. It also quietly sets the tone for the series: magic, schoolyard drama, comic misunderstandings, and friendships tested by everyday choices. Okay, so I've been painting the show as just bad, pretty much this entire video. But I do feel like that's a little harsh. It was a passion project started by a couple brothers in the 2000s, probably fans of the classic My Little Pony, before Friendship is Magic even came out. Although their original vision was probably altered quite a bit since then, the show going through the development hell that it did and all. But I still believe there is some enjoyment to be had from it. While not for me personally, there are plenty of accounts online of people saying things along the lines of, while on the surface this may look like a My Little Pony ripoff, it's actually way more than that, and I can see why people say that. There's clearly passion from the creatives working on it, and I see potential, although it isn't for me. However, if you think you like the look of it from this video, I mean, feel free to give it a go. It's all on YouTube, I'm pretty sure, and hey, maybe someday I'll watch the whole thing and give it a review. And that's it for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed. I sincerely apologise for this one taking a week longer than expected, but I didn't anticipate the complicated development history and also didn't factor in the amount of time it would take to actually watch some of the episodes. I watched about 10, but I thought it would be simpler for the video just focusing on the first one. If you did enjoy, why not leave a like down below and subscribe while you're there. You can also, on mobile, press the new hype button, which helps out small channels like mine and boosts them in the algorithm. So feel free to do so. If you want to support the channel even more, you could become a channel member. Thanks to the Red Ravioli, Creators Zone, and MyFumi for being monotonal members. And with all that, till next week, hopefully, although I may have lost a little credibility with that statement after last week, thanks for watching, I've been Monodash, and I'll see you sometime soon.